Today's guest, Lynn Schäfer.
I'm an absolute enthusiast and passionate about talent management. So really thinking about talent in a strategic way, but not one size fits all, but for each context define who and what is talent. How can we retain people? How can we develop talent? Because things and times have changed. We have wars. People think much more crucial about where they want to spend their working time, what they want to do. They want to feel valued. So I really think this is an extremely interesting time to be in HR. But yeah, I would always recommend to have a talent perspective, look at it from a talent lifecycle approach. And always happy to connect if somebody has further questions.
Lynn and I met at a McKinsey event. She was previously at McKinsey, then at Bertelsmann, at some startups, and now is doing HR and people work at a startup, early stage, grew it from 15 to 50 people with not spending any budget, and also taking all the experience and best practices she has from her 20 years experience as a career. And I think it's really outstanding as a founder or CEO to make a decision to bring somebody that experienced early on instead of hiring an HR working student. And then when another problem comes up, adding 2-3 more, hiring somebody experienced, fractional, part-time. And we talked about what you can do with that experience in an early stage environment in the episode.
Then you can build trust, and then you can spend less time communicating and more time just getting shit done.
Then I went home and thought about this sentence.
We basically put it on the table.
Hiring takes time. People are trained.
How to objectively judge certain situations.
It's very, 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 very hard to change things.
That was the learning.
Entrepreneurs with empathy.
To the people side.
Today's guest, Lynn Schäfer, and we will talk about what you can do as an HR people person without big budgets, even if you also saw what you can do with big budgets, because you have been in corporates, in consulting, and now in a more early stage company. And I think this will be a very practical episode where we really talk about some insights, what you did with low budget, right? So that's really cool to see these different perspectives. But maybe first of all, we just talk about yourself, Lynn. Welcome and happy to have you on board and on the show. We got connected through Eva on an event from McKinsey, and how small the bubble is always cool to see. But maybe we start with a short introduction about yourself.
Yeah, happy to do so. Thanks, Thomas. So my name is Lynn. I'm the head of people and culture at Homee and Stromee, which is a Berlin-based startup for smart home and renewable energy. We're roughly 45 people based in 3 locations in Germany. And you already mentioned that previously. I had the pleasure and honor to really, I think since 2001, work in the HR field. So I'm really super passionate about HR talent management topics. I worked at Bertelsmann, at McKinsey, in several startups, just to round that up in terms of working experience. But also I have this academic passion because I did my PhD on talent management, and I founded together with my professor at that point of time at ESCP Business School, the first European Talent Management Institute, where we did a lot of research on these topics. And finally, I'm also in the advisory board of a smaller consulting company and network, which is called Subject Resole, where we help companies finding a meaningful workplace and purpose. Yeah,
that's interesting. What do you or how do you define a meaningful job or workplace?
Yeah. So the company is called Subject Resole, and soulful organization is defined as those that embody a deep sense of purpose, that foster human connections, that prioritize the well-being and the growth of the employees, actually over its stakeholders. So it's a lot about trust, about connection, authenticity, freedom, responsibility. Maybe you've even heard of democratizing organizations, holacracy. So those are, for instance, concepts that software organizations cope with. Yeah.
Which environment do you prefer more? The consulting side, the corporate side, or the startup side?
At the moment, I love being in a startup because because it's so vivid, it's so agile. You have so much impact, and after years of research and academia, where we also had a lot of impact because we did a lot of research together with companies, but still now being in the position that I can decide today and implement tomorrow and get direct feedback from all the employees. And we are also currently in a financing round, which is super interesting. I would definitely say the startup world at the moment.
Because it's so dynamic, right? So you can
Exactly.
suddenly
Yeah.
you need to do everything, and you then also want to do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's yeah.
In case you like my show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Maybe walk us a bit through your journey in the startup world, because we discussed that you did a lot of things with really zero or no budget. And I think that's something what a lot of startups are facing now at the moment, especially in the people field.
Yeah.
And maybe we can first get a bit of context of what your setup is, what your environment looks like, and then also maybe what are the challenges you have or had and how you solve them.
Yeah. Yeah, very happy to do so. So maybe I can expand a little bit to describe the context I'm currently working in. So when I joined Homee and Stromee back in beginning of early 2022, the company faced severe turmoil and fluctuation, up to 40%, for instance, in the tech department. They were roughly 15 people, so really small startup. And when I joined, of course, we sat together with the CEOs and we discussed what is the business strategy and how can HR ultimately support to achieve this business strategy. So we identified topics such as retention, which means they told me, my CEOs, they told me, Lynn, what about team spirit? We have to increase the employee satisfaction. We have to decrease the turnover. But of course, on the other hand side, it's not just about well-being and fun, but the company has to grow. So help us prepare for the growth phase and help us in developing an organizational design where we can actually grow. At the same time, implement standards, professionalize. We didn't even have an HR software by then. So this was the starting point. And what we then did is we focused very much on developing
And one question
an
first.
organization.
With
Yeah,
which
sure.
hypothesis did the founders hire you? What did they want
Yeah.
to get out of you?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have an HR person before. There were 15 people, and they did it themselves. So they said, we definitely want to grow. We want to become bigger, and we cannot do it on our own. Plus, they experienced so much turmoil that they said, these are severe challenges we face, and we need to have somebody professional to support us. And of course, they could have hired an agency, a consultant, a more junior person. But when we talked, they said, okay, the things you've done in your previous experiences, they will probably help us much more than hiring a junior recruiter. And that's why we sat together. Yeah.
That's actually smart, and I think not all
Yeah.
companies think that far already, because often it's the case that exactly what you say is happening, even maybe just a work student, and then they expect everything from it.
Yeah.
Which usually cannot happen, right? Also, they cannot look at previous experience, and I think especially in the early stage, you need to build stuff very cautiously and also relevant, right? Because you don't have a
Yeah.
lot of resources, you need to focus, and everything what you need to do should really add value
Yeah.
immediate. So tomorrow, as you said.
Exactly. Yeah.
Smart move. And what did you do then?
Exactly. So the first priority was to build and invest in a company culture. They didn't have company values at that point of time, and what we did is we embarked on a cultural journey together with everyone. And by everyone, I really mean the mini jobbers, the interns. We did this online, offline iterations with the management team because we really thought about what is our identity, what are our values, how do we want to work together, and build a foundation to work together and to create an attractive employer brand. Because that is, from my perspective, your homework you have to do before then investing in recruiting and growing. Otherwise, you don't have something to convey in your employer brand. And if you just recruit and are perfect and excellent in recruiting, but you have a retention problem, then in the end you work for nothing. So first,
What was the process on defining those values then?
yeah. So it was really because it was Corona. We met online, and then we had several work groups where we said, what are the 3 criteria you value in working together with different people? So we had different groups, and then they exchanged on what do they value in a collaboration, what has to be the standard, the basis for actually working cross-departmental, cross-functional. And there were things such as togetherness, transparency, working on an eye level, trust. And so we in several iterations then together with the management team and the CEOs developed we have 4, for instance, values, then like performance, togetherness, transparency, and impact. And then in several other workshops at team events, we then did workshops. How do you actually live that in customer service, in your daily work, in product, and in HR? For instance, in HR, we then said, or I then thought about how can I implement these values in our recruiting process, in our hiring process, in our onboarding, by implementing buddies, by telling them how do we actually work together, things like that.
And did you also then do something like job sharing, that different people from different jobs looked into the other departments on what does it mean in terms of value representation, that everybody has a cohesive picture, or was it more separated?
No, we try to really collaborate cross-departmental also in these workshop groups, but also at the same time, because the feedback from the employees was that learning and development didn't have a priority prior to when I started. So they really said in order to get a hold of this retention problem also, let's please invest in learning and development. So at the same time, we invested in learning and development by implementing several initiatives, plus this what we call homee exchange, so that we said we really want to foster the cross-departmental and cross-regional collaboration, because we have these 3 office locations in Germany. The company pays for accommodations for travel up to 1 week, so people from product work together with customer service and different other combinations. Yeah.
Oh, cool. And what else did you then do? Because I think what is really outstanding that you already do this very systematic in the future, in an early stage, looking into the future, that this really makes sense. I can now share an example where I did something similar in my first job, very early stage, junior, everybody first time founder, first time in the job. We did it in a different way. So how not to do it. 2 people in a room, isolated, thinking about all the problems we had in this in the organization and thinking about what do we want to anticipate in the future and write it down.
Mhm.
And then we had 10 values, way too much, that were just written down, put on the wall saying, hey, these are our values. Nobody was engaged. People even felt offended what was written here and there because they interpreted in a way where we wanted to anticipate some behavior like let's foster ownership and blah, 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 right? And they just did not like it because it did not feel like a startup anymore. And we also
Yeah.
not really included the employees.
Mhm.
I think back then the company
Yeah.
was around 30, 40 people. This went
Mhm.
fundamentally wrong. And then ultimately, after some iterations, including a broader group of people and approaching it a bit more, let's say, collaborative, I would say, we ended with 3 values. And then it ultimately also got accepted, we were able to integrate it in the hiring process and
Mhm.
also on how we collaborate and also how the company is leading. And then at some point, I would say this worked. And now after 5, 6 years, I sometimes see the company and then last time I clicked on the website, it's still the same. So it's stuck. And I think it's really the fundamental
Mhm.
behavior of what is defined there. So that's also cool if you
Yeah.
do it that way, right?
Yeah.
So
And
good
this
how
was
you did
really
it.
the first, exactly. So this was really in my first weeks where we started this value, cultural value process. And of course, we also initiated several other um, measures. For instance, we also implemented a company referral or talent referral program because I didn't have any budget. So we said, I cannot pay any headhunters and pay for like 30% retention or retainers. So that's why we initiated this referral program. And we said, we really want to incentivize if employees recommend somebody. And so, I mean, if you look at the academia and several studies, there are lots of companies who already do this, and the average is between 500 and 1,500 euros that company actually, in terms of monetary benefits, pay their employees. A side note, I know when I worked at McKinsey, we didn't have any monetary incentives. So when we referred somebody and that person actually started, somebody got an email from the general manager of Germany at McKinsey at that point of time, because they said, no, working at McKinsey is so great. We don't need any monetary incentives. Accenture at that point of time already had 2,000 euros, but when we implemented it, we said between 500 euros for interns, for instance, up to 3,000 euros for head offs or very senior positions. And this is one of our most successful recruiting channel. So we
How
hired
many percent do you hire from that?
50%,
That's really a lot.
referrals and plus talent pools. And this we initiated at the same time. And
How do you differentiate referrals from talent pools?
yeah, so talent pools, for instance, I actually, as mentioned earlier, I did my PhD on talent management, and I'm a huge fan of candidate or talent relationship management, which means where you have this underlying assumption that by building talent pools and looking at candidates from a more life cycle approach, which means, for instance, candidates can go to uni, then they can graduate, they have their first jobs. Maybe they will quit the company again because they want to do an MBA or they want to go elsewhere. But they can also come back and become rehires or boomerang employees. And this just totally pays off because the candidates in these pools, you have better quality, better access, better time to hire. And in our case, because at McKinsey, I had like a budget of nearly 500,000 to spend on doing parties with ex-interns and candidates where we had the CV. So, and of course, I don't have a software. I have an Excel file which I put out or pulled out, and then for candidates where we, for instance, said in customer service, okay, we have a job we have a job posting, and there were much more candidates who were really cool. We then said, we already filled our positions, but we're growing. So do you want to stay in contact? Do you want to become part of our talent pool? And then as soon as we have a new position, we just get back to you in contact. Or with ex-interns, who said they want to go back to uni, they want to do their masters. Let's stay in contact, and then maybe afterwards you will join again.
And how
yeah.
do you hire the other 50%?
Those were pure referrals in terms of employees who were really committed, engaged, and recommended a person, and then that person was hired, and then they got this referral.
Yeah, that was the referral side, right? But then the
Yeah.
other 50%, which were non-referral, non-talent pool, how did you hire these people?
Normal application processes, job postings, university marketing, which was a very big source also, which means we had target universities where we also went to presentations in that reason, very local, and then hired them through these processes.
And what's your cost per hire then? Do you know it?
That was the cost per hire was, I mean, if I don't include my salary, that was 0.0 probably, because I didn't have any budget. I think in the second year I had budget for Hey Jobs, and then I paid for a Hey Job ad, but I didn't pay for any job ads at that point of time. It was my working time, but we didn't have budget to spend on paid efforts. So I only used LinkedIn, Indeed, those things that are for free, our own website, university marketing, and then this very big source of referrals and talent pools. And just to give you another example from our talent pools, we had lead times of from time from where I contacted them and time where they actually sent the signed contract from less than 5 days.
Wow.
So
Because
contacted
they were
them.
pre-interviewed already with you?
No. We did the interviews. We did 2 rounds of interviews, for instance, in customer service. Then they got the contract and then they signed. Yeah. But they were really, because they were in this talent pool, they were already interested. And then we were also very quick in organizing interviews, of course. And what we also had, which was really, really special, is that candidates who interviewed with us, where we already mentioned we have this referral program in our recruiting process already, we marketed it. We already got candidates who then said, oh, I think I have another friend, I will just contact them. And then we had, I think, 3 or 4 candidates who joined us through this, or already in the working mode, or in the recruiting process. Yeah.
Okay, but then when we calculate the cost per hire roughly, then it would be...
Yeah, then it's more, absolutely.
It's like maybe 500 to 2,000 euros, but not more, I guess.
No, less. Because in customer service, for instance, where we had the highest rate of referrals, it was 500 or 1,000 euros. Yeah. Mm.
In case you have any feedback or anything you want to share with me, please send me an email on thomas@peoplewise.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. And in case you really enjoy the show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. What else did you integrate? And maybe also what is the current state of the organization and where you took it then?
Mm-hmm. Of course. I mean, we did, as mentioned, we did university marketing. We set up talent pools. We had this referral program. And in the end, these measures, they really paid off. I can give you some examples. So of course, after setting up our cultural values, investing in learning and development, having an organizational design and team events, we also measured our employee net promoter score and our engagement index, and those were like roughly 50, over 50, which is really good in terms of employee net promoter score. Engagement.
Just for the context, right? It's a scale from -100 to +100, and I think
exactly
anything that is above 35 is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we're at 41 at the moment. In terms of employee engagement, we're roughly at 8 from 10, which is also good. I mean, we're a small startup. When you look at Kununu, which is like an employer rating platform, the international pendant is Glassdoor. But for Germany, the Kununu score is 4.5, 100% referral or recommendation rate. So employees are really happy. And this, because you asked what is the current state, so we grew up to from 15 to 45. We are currently in a financing round. We will most likely grow even bigger, and we have 3 teams. As mentioned, these scores and the engagement indexes. They demonstrate from the time we implemented them that the employees are quite happy. And of course, there are always times where that changes. There are more challenges, but we definitely try to invest in a very open environment and support each other. Yeah.
Wow, and you did all of this part-time?
Yes, exactly. I started with 60% and now it's 70% because I'm also not doing PR. We also I'm helping a little bit in the financing round because at the moment we don't have a head of HR, head of finance. Yeah. So it's I mean in a startup context, you basically do everything and everyone is doing everything. And if one person is on vacation, of course I'm watering the flowers and stuff like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the earlier the earlier stage the organization, the more
hmm
generalistic people that are just also happy to just be
Absolutely.
hands-on
Yeah.
are
hmm
needed, right? And the bigger you get, the more
hmm
specialization needed at some point. And I think it also makes sense
hmm
there to think about this fractional model, because I think that's really something big for the future, because
hmm
work will be way more individualized and I think
hmm
customized, and therefore you need to have this specialized expertise plus flexibility when you need it
hmm
on demand. And I think that's a prime example for a smart decision to, instead of just hiring 2-3 junior people early on and then
hmm
just adding another one if something comes up,
hmm
hiring somebody like you who is really experienced with around 20 years of experience from different environments, and then say, okay,
hmm
maybe it doesn't make sense to hire you full time, or we could not even afford it. But
hmm
instead of staffing junior staff, we staff a fractional senior employee, and the values are aligned. The, I would say,
hmm
mentality and approach to say let's go hands on is also aligned. So let's
hmm
move. I think that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. I mean,
How would you
also, yeah.
how would you design a business case for decision making, for maybe startups in an early stage at around 15 to 20 people that need to make the first HR people recruiting hire, to go down the route what you did with homee and stromee? How would you design a business case on the hindsight to make it more easy to decide for your solution or for your setup?
I mean, the hiring an HR person is crucial. Hiring a non-junior person is definitely worthwhile. Having CEOs that already are convinced that HR and people and culture is important is fundamental. And then once you have this person, of course, everything needs to be aligned and derived from the business strategy. So, I mean, in the end, I also have to make sure that it's about numbers. We are very EBIT driven. I need to also look at the KPIs. But I mean, it's not a lengthy HR strategy process. So you need to be fast. You need to be pragmatic. And I know these things. Of course, in my case, it helped that I have this knowledge from academia, from McKinsey and stuff. But it costs nothing. You can apply it without any budget. And as mentioned, I didn't even have budget to spend on Hey Jobs or on a job ad in the first year. So exactly. So I mean, in terms of HR case, in our case, what are the major challenges? In our case, it was retention and growth. So first, make sure you have a company culture, values, and then second, what channels are most important? How can you, without any budget, get your people? And it can be that another company would more invest, for instance, in youth Azubi recruiting or more blue collar workers, and then recruit is totally different. But for a startup, being active in the tech scene as an energy provider, our biggest departments were tech and customer service. So that's why we chose employee referral systems, talent pools, and stuff. Yeah.
Makes sense. Any final words?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an absolute enthusiast and passionate about talent management. So really thinking about talent in a strategic way, but not one size fits all. But for each context, define who and what is talent. How can we retain people? How can we develop talent? Because things and times have changed. We have wars. People think much more crucial about where they want to spend their working time, what they want to do. They want to feel valued. So I really think this is an extremely interesting time to be in HR. But yeah, I would always recommend to have a talent perspective, look at it from a talent lifecycle approach. Yeah, and always happy to connect if somebody has further questions. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Lynn. It was really great to have you on my show, and I also refreshed and learned a lot.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Thomas.